Support from animals comes in a variety of different forms. In today's episode, we've got two really good examples of them. Here's the first one. You're working a night shift at a long-term nursing facility, and suddenly you hear the automatic doors open. So you walk up to the front entrance to see why the doors are open. And to your amazement, you see a dog. Now, I'm not kidding. A dog settling down on the visitor's couch. He looks up to you the way dogs look at you. His tail's wagging, and without a doubt, he's got a huge smile on his face. Now, this is a first. So you being you get him some water and something to eat. Now, when the morning comes, you have to explain to your supervisor why there's a dog on my couch. Well, everybody, please meet Scout and wait to hear what joy and support he has brought to this facility and its residents. Then, you've recently lost your pet. Either they're lost and missing or passed away. You're depressed, you feel a heavy loss, and you're having an extremely hard time just dealing with anything and everything. What can you do? Did you know that there are experts in dealing with pet grief? In today's episode, we bring you two very different types of support. Kaleel Salakeeny and Jennifer Martinique join us, and they tell us their story and also guide us. This is an informative and a heartwarming episode, and I'm sure you're really going to appreciate everything they have to say. We are supported by PrepVet, providing stem cell therapy for pets.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at prepvet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
For real, 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 for real. Got a bunch of furry friends and I love them all the same. I'm an animal lover, veterinarian is the name. Let's share some pet stories from heartwarming to strange, losses and gains, from wacky to insane. For real. You're now tuned in to For Real with your host, Mark Kyle.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the For Real podcast. Today we have a two-parter, and I think you're really going to like this episode. In the first half, I was privileged to have Kaleel Salakeeny. Kaleel, welcome to the show.
My pleasure.
What happens when you lose a pet? Now, when I talk about losing a pet, they may pass away or they may be lost. And Animal Talks Inc. goes into grief counseling and how to handle it. Kaleel, thanks so much for taking the time. And I'm just happy to have you on here because if anybody's ever been a pet owner or a lover or pet parent or whatever, we've all lost our pets. And sometimes we just don't know how to deal with it. Let's talk about what you do, how you got into it, and I'll pass the baton to you.
Yeah, no, you're right. Until recently, there really weren't many resources for people who lost a pet. I don't think people consider that to be a major event or a significant event, so it was just passed over. It's only been recently that animals have really become totally engaged with us and become family. Remember, not so long ago, dogs were left outside in the dog houses and cats were put out at night and they never had food from the table and whatever. But now they are truly members of the family. So that's a big change. That's a big emotional change in our lives, a big psychological change. And so when they die, whether it's expected or anticipated or not, it's very painful. It's because it is losing a member of the family and in some cases more powerfully so. So I got into this because I lost a big, beautiful, just the biggest love of my life. She was an adorable cat. He was, and he was amazing. And so when he passed, I was stunned. I did all the wrong things. I drank too much. I wandered around the streets. I just stayed out late. I just couldn't come home. The house was too empty. My life seemed to have lost meaning, purpose, function, reality. And I didn't know what to do. There was no one I could turn to. And I showed people the extent of my grief. They would be shocked and dismayed, uncomfortable because it was a cat. And how could you, good thing it wasn't a person, they would say. Well, that's not true. And so I guess one thing led to another, and I guess I was guided. I mean, I think guided to study in the Theology Institute, where I became an ordained pastor, and then perhaps as importantly, if not more so, an ordained animal chaplain, which then led me to become a credentialed pet grief and loss counselor. And then one more step just to become a credentialed loss and grief counselor in general. But, we founded Animal Talks as the organization that people can turn to when they're suffering from pain, a loss of a pet. And that's where we're at now.
Well, one of the things that when I read and when I'm doing a little research on that, you're one of maybe a dozen in the world that does this, correct?
Right. I mean, there are some people they call pet chaplains, and maybe a handful of animal chaplains, but none of them has been, except maybe two or three, been ordained. What difference does that make? Well, it makes a big difference because it's not so much a profession as it becomes a mission. So yeah, there are very few of us who combine credentialed pet and grief counselors with being an ordained animal chaplain, with being a pastor, because when people lose their pet, it raises all kinds of spiritual questions. So, in my role as a pastoral counselor, as well as an animal chaplain, I'm able to answer some of those tough questions like, does my pet go to heaven? Or will I see my pet again? Or these kinds of things. So, yeah, there are many to do that.
Well, one of the things, I mean, again, having owned pets my entire life, when you lose those, there is a pain there. And what's interesting, one of the things that you say in your website, the difference between the loss of a loved pet and a human is you're free from all the resentments and all the other stuff, betrayals and stuff that you have in a human to human relationship because these guys, they love you
Mhm,
for no reason other than they love you. So you don't have all that baggage.
mhm. Yeah, no, that's right. Well said, Mark. You're absolutely right. I mean, look, I love my family very deeply, my children, my wife, my grandkids, my friends, but it's not always easy. I mean, there's disagreements, misunderstandings, different ways of communicating, betrayals, denials, criticisms, judgments. We don't have that with our animal companions. We don't have that with our animal friends. I mean, the love is just simply without having to pass through our minds, without having to be filtered through our intellect. The love is just gut level emotional connection, and that's so pure and so rare. I mean, it's possible for people to have it, I suppose. They call each other their soulmates, and God bless them. If they have a soulmate, then that's great. But for most of us, we don't. And our animals become the soulmates that we are yearning for because our hearts need to be completed and filled, and that's what an animal does.
Well, they fill a gap that some people just don't have. I mean,
That's right.
to me, my dog is everything to me, and I have children, and they're everything to me, but differently. There's a different relationship.
What kind of dog do you have, and what's his name or her name?
Her name is Mabel, and she comes up in the show. She'll probably bark while we're here because I record in my studio is actually at my house because my office
Good.
it echoes there. But she'll probably bark because she lets herself know that she's here all the time.
That's nice. Yeah. What kind of dog is she?
I always call her Mexican rat dog. She's a rescue that's got a little bit of everything in her. Whatever she is, it's pretty wild.
That's lovely. God bless her, both of you. That's great.
One of the things you talk about, and I think it's one of the well, everything's relevant in there. One of the things that really resonated with me is when you think about animals today, if you think back to the Native Americans
Mm,
and the way they honored animals back in the day and other cultures, that it's really kind of where we're getting today. What you mentioned earlier, that in today's times, we're not just putting the dog out in the backyard. We've got him in our house or sleeping in our beds or doing all the things, but we're kind of getting to where
that's right.
different cultures were a long time ago.
Yeah. I mean, You know, it just raises so many different questions, and I don't mean to impose my views on the audience or on you, but I happen to be a vegan because I was struck by the contradiction, which is to say, what is it? There's a poster I saw somewhere. How can you love the one and eat the other? So it's like if I love my cat or my dog, bunny, hamster, rabbit. I don't know. I mean, how do you then justify, whatever the slaughter that takes place in these the animal agriculture and its effect on the environment and on our climate. So yeah, I mean, it's a mixed bag, and having a pet in your life, in a way, forces you to ask those kinds of moral and ethical questions. I mean, pet depends upon me. And what bothers me sometimes, drives me crazy, is when I see people walking their dogs and they forget it's the dog's walk. It's not your walk. So why are you on your phone talking to someone or pulling your dog along so you can make the train, the commuter rail to work or get to your next appointment? So, it isn't just, we don't just have a pet for our convenience and comfort and solace, although that was true during the pandemic, big time.
Right now.
But we have an obligation. It's a dog's walk, and you have to show that respect and that love and that thoughtfulness and that kindness. And by extension, hopefully by extension, which doesn't always happen, you extend that love and that compassion and open heartedness to the world, and it makes you a better human being. So I call animals, pets, the angels of our better selves. They just bring out the best in us.
I love that term, angels of our better selves. That's a great term.
Yeah,
I really like that term.
good. Yeah,
So let's talk about grief. I know one of the things, everybody deals with grief in different ways. So regardless if it's an animal, human, or whatever,
that's right.
and how you address grief. I know one of the things you talk about on your website and actually some articles I read that you've been interviewed with, you're not treating a mental disorder, you're dealing grief. So you're helping people have tools to deal with a trauma,
Hmm.
I guess is a good word for me.
Sure.
And how to handle that and tools and what to do. So I know you, like you said, you lost your cat and you got there. So let's walk through some of the processes that you can help people with and how you do it and all that kind of stuff. Let's start with grief. So I've lost my pet, regardless of how I've lost it.
Okay.
I contact you.
Right.
What's the next step?
That when somebody contacts me, they can come from many sources, so wherever they come from, they come. And the first thing I ask them is to write me a story. It doesn't. I don't want it to be edited. I don't want it to be proofread, spell checked, anything. I want you to write me your story. When this pet came into your life, what your lives were like, what are some of the funniest, best moments you've had? What was the end like? How do you feel about that? When did it happen? Are you okay with the veterinarian? Did he or she treat you with the compassion and openness that? So I need that story. Everybody has a story. And I find, though it's difficult for many people to do this, to write this, because the grief is so fresh, it's just so raw, that sitting down and putting their thoughts and their feelings down is even more painful because it just brings up all the hurt and all the missing and all the longing. But that's the first step because then we are externalizing the grief. Not only that, it gives me a way into their story, into their lives, because so many therapy sessions are just a waste of time. You sit there and you talk, and you come back the next week and you talk, and you never really get anywhere. It just goes round in circles. Some people go to therapy for 10 or 15 years, nothing happens. But this story gives me a way in. And every single time I read these stories, I see that the death of a pet is a portal, a gateway into some other death that's happened in this person's life that has not been mourned, that has not been grieved properly. It's coming back to haunt them, and the pet's death has kind of given them permission to reflect on that. So then we set up a time to talk. I prefer to talk by phone because I think it's more intimate than Zoom, although if they want Zoom, we can do Zoom. And then I just listen. My job is to be a companion on someone's grief journey. My job is not to fix because there's nothing broken. My job is not to heal because really the healing is their own. I listen to their story and we go over their story and they talk about how they feel. And then we talk about certain ceremonies, memorials, Again, ways of externalizing the grief, taking grief breaks so that they begin to get some control over the process and understand that it's never going to end. If someone said, "How long will I grieve?" Reverend K, you'll grieve. How long will your pet or your spouse or your friend be dead? Forever. It's forever. The pain softens, but the grief never goes away. So those are some of the processes we go through. And I like to think that we don't usually need more than 3 or 4 sessions. That pretty much does it. And then they're well on their way because it really is a personal journey. If I play any role at all, it's more, as I said, a kind of companion on the journey because there's nothing broken to fix. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell, I guess.
So, I like the word companion. So, I guess at some level, because when you lose a loved pet, they are your companion. So now you've got this void, you've lost this companion. So, in some levels, you fill that void to become the companion to guide them through it, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. It's their grief. I must never forget that. They're the expert in their grief.
Hmm.
I don't know their grief because their grief is their grief. Like when somebody says, "Oh, you must feel terrible." I know how you feel. Well, you don't know how I feel. You just don't.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, I know how they feel because I felt it, but I don't know how they feel because they're who they are, and I am who I am. But I get it. I get the language of grief. I get the feeling of grief. And so I just sort of bear witness to their process, companion them in the sense of asking questions, letting them feel unjudged, hoping that they feel that their grief is not disenfranchised, judged, taken away, minimized, and that they get into the strangest and deepest places, and that's okay. They can say that to me. It's all right. And when you name it, in a sense, you kind of tame it. And so I'm just there, as you said, as a kind of guide, a reference point. When they get their bearings and get their legs underneath them, they pretty much move through their own healing process from grief to grieving to mourning. After mourning becomes a kind of healing, which is not the same thing as curing. Curing is making well, fixing. Healing is making whole. And then that's how that process goes.
So you're a guide to help them not really be locked where they are to help them move forward.
That's right. It's a good way of putting it. It's an exceptional way of putting it. Yeah.
So I know you also do, what do they call, the PEF grief healing circles? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I hear your dog in the background now.
Of course, she loves attention.
I hear and yeah. Now we have a once a month meeting. I mean, it's funny because a lot of people say to me there are a lot of hotlines where they call when they lost a pet, but either the line is disconnected or nobody picks up, or somebody just has a Pablo mechanical answer. Sometimes there are healing circles, but they're usually for people who have lost someone to death by suicide or spousal loss, or so there aren't a lot of monthly pet healing circles. So we have a monthly pet healing circle. And sometimes it's really, really well attended. Sometimes there's nobody there. We did a blessing of the animals a couple of weeks ago on Zoom, and that was great. So the healing circle is just what the name implies, people who have, want the company of other people. And so it sort of works back and forth. Some people want one on one work, and some people want to work in a group, and some people want both. They want to work in a group for personally for a while, then they want to be with other people and share their stories and learn from their experiences. So that's what we have. It's a monthly group, and I think it should be listed on our website. Uh, I think we maybe they're not doing it in December, maybe pick up again in January, but that should be on our website.
Well, another thing I read too is that you actually talk to different groups, like small groups like schools and community centers and churches.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about that. So if you go to a school, is it usually smaller kids or older kids? What is it?
Well, it's typically middle grade or high school or libraries or church groups, and it depends. I mean, with library talks, it's typically adults, who use this library talk as an opportunity for a group healing session. They all come with their stories. The stories can range from, anticipatory grief to grief. And some are in tears, so much so they can't speak. They just want to be there. In a church setting, sometimes it's about faith, the role of faith in grief, how spirituality plays into grief, how grief challenges your belief, sometimes negatively affects your faith. With smaller kids, that doesn't usually happen. Middle grade kids, it's they're so full of life and charged with so much energy. So we might talk a little bit about pet care and pet welfare in that context, but it's usually the church groups and the library groups and the civic groups where people have lived long enough, to know the pain of loss and death.
Well, I love kids, so anything that has to do with kids to me is important because they're just trying to learn how to navigate the world, and all of a sudden they have a loss in their family with whatever their favorite pet or whatever. To have some kind of tool to figure that out.
Kids mourn very deeply. It's a big thing how to talk to a child who's lost a parent or lost a sibling or in this case lost a pet. And there are ways, I guess, it depends upon the age of the child and the relationship the child had to that pet. I mean, if a kid has a dog at when they're 1 year old, and that dog lives to be like 16 or 17, and this kid is now a kid going off to college, well, that pet becomes virtually a sibling to that person. And therefore, when that pet dies, even that adolescent, that 16 and 17, has a profound response. Or if the death is at 3 years old, it's likely the first experience of death a child has ever had, whether it's a goldfish or a hamster or a rabbit. And so there's a parent's opportunity to talk to their child about death and what to say, what not to say, how to handle it. So it's it's really kind of a trip in a way.
Well, I mean, again, tools in the toolbox. When you're a kid, you're not prepared to have a loss that you don't understand,
That's right.
and to have somebody to help you, again, being a companion or guide to help them figure out how to navigate that, I think is really important.
It's a great moment for parents too, because they get a chance to to really guide their child through the grief process and well, I guess help prepare them for somebody said dress rehearsal, but not really.
Yeah.
Help prepare them for bigger deaths later in their lives. I suppose if it's done well, I guess.
Well, another thing that I read on your site and all that, which I found interesting, it makes a lot of sense, is oftentimes when you lose your best friend, your pet, and then what happens is all this other stuff emerges from issues you may have in as a human in your personal life. Can you kind of dig in that a little bit? I mean, I understand it, but I think you explaining it would probably help me understand it better.
Well, it's funny because I don't quite understand it, but it happens. It happens. I mean, somebody again has lost a mom, and maybe is overwhelmed with the size of the loss and the father's response to it and the relative's response to it, or maybe she or he and the mom didn't get along especially well, or the mourning process was taken out of their hands and they were angry or ashamed because they said certain things to the mother. Now they can't take it back. It's over and done with. So when the mom dies, that grief is somewhat blocked. It's not quite clean. It's corrupted in some ways with guilt and bad feelings, and it's sort of pushed in the background. So then, when the pet dies, 10 years later, 20 years later, 15 years later, who knows? Who can say? All of a sudden, then, in mourning the pet, that unlocks the loss and the grief that was in the past, and it becomes an opportunity for the person then to deal with multiple losses and multiple grief situations, which they can now do because the pet somehow has unlocked that, and they now have to go back and do the work they should have done then.
That's great. Now, one other things you do is you're an animal communicator, and we talked about the other day about animal behaviorist versus animal communicator.
Right.
Let's go into that a little bit so people understand that better.
Well, I'm curious to know if anybody even cares, but animal communication is a relatively new phenomenon, and I believe it's true. I don't think I would take it all to the bank because it's still unproven, and I mean, it's not the kind of thing you can measure. Or maybe you can. I don't really know, but animal communication. I forget the name of the woman that started this. Oh, she's right on the tip of my tongue, but I can't recall it. Anyway, I took 7 of 8 courses in it, and the point of animal communication is the Native Americans, as you refer to, somehow communicated with animals, and we know St. Francis did, and we know Dr. Doolittle did. So there's something there. And I think that the approach is that we develop what we call a stillness practice, that we bring our minds and our energies down to a different level, a level that's not full of distraction, and that we sit with our animal companion, we lower our energy, we quiet our minds, we still our heartbeats, and we just become patient. And we ask a question. And the question we frame almost as a kind of cartoon, as if it were coming out of your mouth. Animals communicate much more quickly than we do. We tend to be slower at communicating than animals do. And so, in my experience, there have been some times when I've had absolutely genuine animal communication from a distance. I mean, remember one time in particular, I had spent some time in the western part of the state, met a lovely dog, played with the dog, came home in my house. My cat was there. It's a couple hundred miles away. And I remember thinking about the dog and hearing the dog say, "Are you coming back? Will you play ball with me again?" And I know that was an absolute result of the communication that we had established. Other times it just doesn't work. So while I know there's something there, I can't affirm it 100% except to say it's worth exploring and worth investigating.
I believe it. I mean, even if, communication between you and your own pet, I can tell you right now, when I'm around my dog, I know what she wants because she's around me and we're communicating now. I don't know if that's me communicating or the behaviorist because I know how she responds to certain things. But if I talk to her, she's looking at me and paying attention. Like, first of all, are you crazy? What are you talking to me for? Or
Right.
she's paying attention to what I'm saying. I'm right there with you.
Yeah, you're right. I think what happens then is then when somebody hires you then as an animal communicator to communicate with their animal and they're 3,000 miles away, can you focus in on that animal? I ask for a photograph. I ask for a description of the animal. I ask for a little bit of a history. So can you focus in on that animal? Not some, I mean, yeah, sure. I know when my dog wags her tail, or I can read the signs, or when a cat wants her tummy rubbed or doesn't want. I can read the signs of animal behavior. That's relatively easy. And I know my dog knows what I want, what I'm thinking, because dogs are very good at reading facial expressions. But there's another level that I'm questioning whether we can tap into or not. And I think sometimes we can, and I think it's worth studying.
Well, have you heard about? I had a friend of mine, actually a veterinarian, on that. She's integrative veterinarian, but they do energy transfer. So not only do they do energy transfer one on one when they're close, but they can do it by distance. And she's a practicer of it, a practitioner of that, and has great results with these animals by actually doing energy transfer via a Zoom call or whatever. Pretty crazy.
Yeah, no, I also am certified in Reiki,
Okay.
Reiki 1 and Reiki 2, just as I am in animal communication, just as I am in EFT, emotional freedom technique, which some people call tapping. So yeah, no, I believe that, and I hired, even though I am a Reiki and I work with animals, I did hire someone when my pet was sick because I thought she was good. I thought she was better than I was anyway. And so I had her come in and she performed Reiki on my animal. And did it help? I think so. I think any quiet energy transfer of love, transfer of positive energy exists and is very beneficial without question.
Well, I know some people out there are so traditional, but I think if you open your mind, and the more I'm out, with my business, I'm in the vet world a lot, and I'm around that and around animals, and I absolutely believe, and as time goes on more and more, that there's things we just don't know, but they work.
Yes. I agree with you. And I think that because we're doing, and I just did a program last week with on inspirational radio or something or other, and this guy was very, very, very keen on the sacred powers that we contain within us, and I believe we are sacred beings. I believe animals are sacred beings, and I think that when we can when we can quiet our minds and put aside random thoughts and put aside the interference that comes from living in a highly technological world and are distracted, then there is a space, a clearing where the animal and you are very much in sync and you can feel what it is they want and need, whether they're in pain, what it is they are thinking, visualizing, wishing for. And I can get that connection. I really can. But it's intuitive. It's trusting your intuition, but also doing some work. And there's training that goes into that, where we would have to sort of um, intuit what the color of the food bowl would be in the animal's home that we were working with, or to it where the animal slept through communicating with their animal, whether they liked their bed or not. And the person who had the pet would tell us whether they were wrong or right, hot or cold. So there were fail safe methods involved that we got involved in during our training. And I believe in it. There's no question. It just isn't the direction I chose to place my emphasis.
Well, I think if you open your mind and you just pay attention to everything, more people would be using other alternative ways or other tools to help deal with whatever you're dealing with.
I think you're right.
Well, I know you were running out of time, and that, I mean, we talked about 25 minutes and we're past that. So let's do this instead. I think I'm good with questions, but why don't you let give everybody out there a way to get a hold of you, how to find you, either social media, website, kind of give them direction to get there. And that way, anybody that's going through any kind of grief through losing, their best friend, how they get a hold of you, point them in the right direction.
Okay, I would say the first thing to do is just feel free to reach out. Take a look at our website, which, as Mark said, is Animal Talks, that's plural, Animal Talks Inc., INC.com, Animal Talks Inc. And that will give you, or give anybody, real insight into who we are, how we work, and what we value, and what our approach is, and also some resources, some videos, some audio, some books. We have a couple of ebooks on grief that you might want to buy for $10 or things of this nature. So that's where you start. And then there is my email address. So if you really want to talk further about, what you're going through or want some help, email me directly and say, look, Kaleel, Reverend K, this is what happened. I lost my best friend, and I can't handle it. Can we talk? What do you suggest? What do you think? So we do that. It's therapy, it's counseling, it's grief work, and those are the two best ways. I can't give my phone number out because that would just be over the top. But we will talk by phone or by Zoom, and then we'll get as much work done together as you can and as I can help you with. So that's probably it, Mark.
Well, great. So, again, if you go to animaltalksinc.com, you can find out information for real. And last thing is, as everybody knows, I have a joke I tell. Just hang in there, Kaleel, and we'll do it. So, the joke I have today is, what does the buffalo say when his son goes to school? And it's your typical dad joke, and I know everybody cringes when I say it. What he says is, "Bye, son."
Oh,
See? It's silly. I get
I,
it. Again, thank you so much for being on the show.
oh, my pleasure, Mark.
Khalil, I know you're busy. I know, but this is a tool for everybody out there.
I hope so.
And we'll be right back. We're supported by Let's Walk, that's here to love your animals like our own.
Austin, Houston, and Denver. Let's Walk is here to love your animals like our own. From daily walks, play, in-house sleepovers, and more. Go to work, out on the town, or take a vacation knowing your pets are in the best hands. This woman-owned small business does it all. Check us out on Instagram at Let's Walk Austin, Houston, and Denver.
Hey, we're back for the second part of the show. I feel very lucky to have a special person from Meadowbrook Medical Care Facility join us to talk about the heartwarming story of Scout. And wait till you hear it. So please welcome Jennifer Martinek. Jennifer, thanks so much for taking the time for being on the show.
Well, shall I start from the beginning and how we got Scout to come live with us?
Absolutely. However you want to go. I know everybody is going to want to hear it, especially when they hear the whole story and how wonderful you guys have been and what a great team the facility, everybody else there, and Scout.
Okay. Well, it all started back in 2017. One night, early in the morning, one of our midnight supervisor nurses was walking through the main lobby and she came across a dog lying on the couch in the lobby. At that time, we had automatic doors that when you stood in front of them, they would open, and we didn't lock them at night. And so she called the police department and they came and got the dog and they brought it back to the Humane Society, which was kitty corner. It was about a fourth of a mile down the road. And the dog had escaped. It had climbed up over a chain wire fence that was approximately 10 feet tall and then scaled another fence to walk across the highway and crawl onto the couch here at Meadowbrook.
It sounds like he's part goat.
I know, right?
Hey, let me ask you a quick question so everybody understands. Let's talk about Meadowbrook really quick so everybody knows who you guys are and how many people are there, the average age, a little bit of that kind of stuff, if you could. So just think about everybody out there doesn't know anything. So let's kind of give them a visual.
Oh, sure. So Meadowbrook Medical Care Facility is a long-term nursing home, and we have 100, don't quote me exactly, 100 and I want to think 36 beds throughout the facility split up into 6 different households, each household averaging 20 to 22 residents.
Okay.
And so the main lobby is where the dog first started.
So I'm going to put a little visualization. So you've got this dog. He climbs over a chain link fence that's 10 feet high, crosses a highway. Is it a busy highway?
It is not as busy during the nighttime hours, but during the daytime hours it is.
So a busy highway normally,
Mhm.
and then he climbs another fence. He comes into automatic doors, and you guys find him on a couch.
Well, he climbed 2 fences at the animal shelter. We do not have fences here at Meadowbrook.
Oh, okay.
But he first climbed out of his individual dog cell and then jumped the actual fence for the Humane Society. So he did scale 2 different fences.
That's crazy. And he comes in the door and decides the couch is his new bed.
Yep, and so the night supervisor found him sleeping on the couch and called
Mm-hmm.
the local police, who then returned him to the animal shelter. Well, then again, 2 more nights that same week, he did the exact same thing. He ended up on our couch both times again during the early morning hours. And so at that point in time, one of the staff members that worked here decided that he really wanted a new home. So she then took him home and adopted Scout into her family. Unfortunately, it wasn't a good fit at her home. Her and her husband both worked, and he didn't like to be alone during the day. So she started asking if anybody could adopt him because he wasn't a good fit. So that's when our administrator here at Meadowbrook said, why don't we adopt him? And so she sent out an email to all the different households within the facility and asked if anybody wanted to take on that responsibility. So myself and the clinical care coordinator for the Glacier Hill House in Meadowbrook decided that we wanted to take on that task for our residents. So that's how Scout came about here at Meadowbrook.
So he picked you guys first, and then you guys got the chance to pick him back.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. That's pretty awesome. So now you've adopted this dog, Scout, and that was that was his name beforehand? You guys didn't name him, right?
That is what the animal shelter named him, and we chose to keep that name.
Well, I find myself when I'm talking to people about animals all the time, and I'm sure you've had these experiences too. Dogs always seem to know something. Cats do too, but dogs, it's funny how they like some people and they don't like others, but there's some kind of energy that some people put off that just attracts them, I think at least.
Correct. And we see that here with him as well. We see that there must have been some neglect in his past. He definitely had issues in the beginning with our maintenance crew. They would wear dark uniforms and would have keys jingling on their belts, and that was a trigger. He would bark at them, and he would get scared when they would come through the facility. He has since gotten used to them, but that we figure that there's something to his past that we just don't know.
Well, I read something that the shelter had said. I think it was the director of the shelter, and they said when they first had him, apparently had pellets that they think he was probably shot by a BB gun or something like that. And absolutely, it had been abused because he had a fear of strangers. He was really excited at the beginning. So, what a wonderful thing, first of all, if he found you guys, but you got to find him. So he was afraid of the maintenance guys. He got adjusted to him. Let's talk about life in the nursing home for Scout. Let's tell me some stories. I can't wait to hear some of them.
He has it pretty good here. He has free roam of the Glacier Hill house, which, like I said before, is we on this floor have 20 residents that reside here, and he has his bed in the den, which is where my office is as well. And so his food bowl, water bowl, all of his toys and his dog bed are in the den, so he can come and go as he wishes. He goes into the residents' rooms. He will crawl into bed with them. He knows which residents have dog biscuits for him. There was one resident in particular who has since passed away. They had this little routine where, first of all, Scout, he can open the doors. He's very inclined that way. He can maneuver the handles and open up their doors. And he would go in to this one gentleman's room at night and put his cold, wet nose on him until he would wake up. And if he wouldn't wake up, he would bark once and wait. And then the resident would play like he was sleeping, and then he would bark again until the resident would sit up and get him a dog biscuit out of his nightstand. And he knows who favors him and who don't. If there's a resident that isn't a dog person, then he pretty much lets them be. He lets them approach him rather than him approaching the resident. But overall, we haven't had many residents throughout his 6 years here that didn't love having a pet in the household.
Well, and I'm sure the ones that didn't probably just had never had dogs or something like that before. It's probably the case.
Correct.
But so let me ask you this. How much weight's he gained since 2017? Sounds like he's getting fed all the time.
We had to put him on a little diet for a while because he likes bacon. That's his favorite. And in the
Well, who
morning
doesn't?
time, right. In the morning time, he would go from room to room and sit patiently until they would give him some bacon. And we even have residents that would order extra bacon just so that they had a treat to feed Scout.
So I'm guessing all the residents' families too are bringing presents for him and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's pretty spoiled.
As he should be, by the way. So, one of the things I read, and let's talk a little bit about that. And, again, I read it, so I'm assuming it's the case. And I see this in normal life anyway with animals, but it said something about when one of the residents is either sad or not feeling very well, that he tends to snuggle up to him and kind of just hang out with him.
He does. He can sense when they're not feeling well, when someone is in the end stage of life. He will spend more time in the room with them as they're fading away. He'll actually climb on the bed with them and lay with them to comfort them.
Aw.
Yes, he helps. One resident in particular, she says that when she's feeling down, especially in the wintertime when she can't get out with her family as often as she would like, Scout senses it and goes into her room and sits on her bed, and she says she can just sit there and talk to him, and he just listens.
Aw, that kind of puts tears in my eyes. So nice. There's some studies out there. There's a group I'm actually talking to tomorrow, but there's some studies out there that talk about how important dogs are, just petting them when you go through some kind of depression, that how that'll make you feel better. And it's absolutely true. I mean, having been a pet owner my entire life, they can bring your spirits up. There's no more loyal person or loyal being in the world than an animal.
Absolutely.
How old is he now? Do you guys think?
They don't know for sure. The last time I went to the vet with him, I did ask, and they figure somewhere between 9 and 12 years old, just by looking at the gray that he has around his face and his teeth. They can't be for sure, but somewhere between 9 and 12.
So if he's 9, 2/3 of his life he's been there. If he's 12, at least half of his life he's been with you guys.
Absolutely, yeah.
God, it's so awesome. You know what I read? I read that when there's thunderstorms, he gets scared and he snuggles up with the residents as well.
He does, and actually, we had a big thunderstorm about a week and a half ago, and one of the coworkers here sent me a picture, and he usually tries to find the largest male resident that we have to protect him, because he is our protector, but when it comes to storms, he becomes the biggest baby and he needs to be protected. And so one of the staff members went into a room and found him between the male resident and the bed, or the wall, and he had his head underneath the pillow and he was under the blankets as well. And all you could see was his nose sticking out of the pillow. And it was one of the smallest residents that we have in our household, but he felt safe with him, and the resident was laughing, and it just, having a dog at the facility makes it feel more like home. And that's what our residents have said time and time again, is when they have to come to a facility, they feel like they're losing that sense of home,
Mhm.
that they're going to more of an institution. But here they said it feels like home because they have a dog or an animal. Even if they haven't had a dog in the past, it feels like home.
So have you had other facilities reach out and ask about that, about maybe getting dogs for their facilities? That's out of curiosity.
We may have. I haven't talked to any personally, but maybe the administration has had conversations, but that I'm not entirely sure of.
Well, that to me, that just makes sense. I mean, think about what he's giving you guys. Obviously, what you guys are getting from him and what he's getting from you. It would seem to me that would be a great solution for other facilities like yours and in that. Do you agree?
Absolutely. It cheers everybody's day up. When I'm here in the facility, I will take him to different households as well so that the other residents get that experience as well. And it's amazing when you walk down the halls and into a room and they see him and they're so excited. It's just you can't help but smile.
So you guys got 4 facilities or 5 facilities there? Or 5 households, I'm sorry.
We have 7 households currently. We have 5 of those households open.
And so basically you guys are the privileged household because you've got Scout.
We like to think so, yes.
Now I heard what I read too, Scout just got a big award recently from you guys a couple months ago, where he was the resident of the month.
He was the resident of the month, and that is something that the residents here, they have a resident council, and they actually they vote and they choose a resident every month, and they actually chose Scout to be the resident of the month.
That's pretty cute. So anything else, any other stories you want to tell? Or I know you guys are, you're doing your own thing and you took your time. Any other stories you want to share with everybody or anything?
Well, we currently have a fundraiser going right now, and it's our second annual. It's called Scouts House Pause for the Pantry. And what that is we started that last year, and we thought we would have a charity so that Scout can give back to the animal shelter that he came from. And so we are currently taking donations of food, toys, beds, anything for any type of animal that could be in need. And even we've had people sending money so that we can give that to the shelter as well. So we're doing that in Scout's name.
Mm-hmm. And how would people get a hold of you guys to donate?
We actually just started a Facebook page through Meadowbrook for Scout himself. And so he has his own phone line here at Meadowbrook with his barking is his ringtone. And you can call and leave a message, and we will get back with you on how and where to donate. Or you can just go on to the Facebook page and the information should all be there.
So the Facebook page is Meadowbrook Medical Care Facility?
That is correct. Yep.
Okay, cool. So people can look at that. And so are you guys playing the song Who Let the Dogs Out all the time?
No, but that's a great idea.
It'd be a great ringtone for him. Who let the dogs out? He's the one that got out.
Yes, that would be great. I'll have to let them know.
Okay, well, listen, Jennifer, thank you so much for taking the time to be on here. Now, I do something with every podcast that you're just going to have to, you get to be the guinea pig on this one a little bit. It's an easy one. So I always I either have the guest or I tell a animal joke, just part how we end up the episode. And we're doing it so other people can send in and record it. So I have a joke for you. And let's see if you can get the answer. It's just it's one of those silly kind of dad jokes.
All right.
So why didn't the dog want to play football?
Why didn't the dog want to play football? I give up. I don't know the answer.
He was a boxer.
That is too funny.
Okay. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining today. Everybody out there, we're going to have some information for you once we have our social media out on this. But if you want to donate and help with Scouts giving back to, and then actually the name of the animal shelter is the Antrim County Animal Shelter, correct? It's in Bel Air, Michigan.
Yes.
Okay, good. So they're doing a fundraiser. Scout's done a lot for these guys. Let's do some stuff to give back to Scout for what he's doing for these guys and, of course, what they're doing for him. So you can either reach them through their Facebook page or even get a hold of Meadowbrook Medical Care Facility and give back. But Jennifer, thanks very much for taking the time. I know you guys are busy. This is such a great story. Everybody needs to have a Scout in their life, and I'm glad he found you and you found him.
Well, thank you for having us.
And for all the listeners out there, thanks again for listening, and keep following us at For Real. And you guys have a great day. Take care now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
For real, 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 for real.
We are supported by PrepVet, providing stem cell therapy for pets.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at prepvet.com. Save 10% with promo code FURREALPODCAST, covered by most pet insurance.
That concludes this episode of For Real with your host, Mark Kyle. For previous and future episodes of For Real, listen via all major podcast streaming sites.